It's an interesting group and ultimately one that I'm not sure that we'll have answers until the football's kicked off.
Pay heed, all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, here with Kevin Flaherty, as always. And, of course, we're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. We are back, and we're going to talk a little bit of football on today's show. We've been continuing our position breakdowns of each group over the course of spring. And spring football has ended, but we still have a couple position groups to get to. And actually, in our infinite wisdom, we specifically waited for this position group for a certain reason. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't do that, but it just so happened to work out that there was some news related to this that we'll get into as well. Before we dive into all that, of course, as always, if you have not already, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, where we've surpassed 800 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So huge thank you to those of you that have already subscribed. And if you haven't, what are you waiting for? You definitely want to, so that you can have access to more content, plus videos of all of our shows, and plenty more as we continue through the offseason process and then into 2025 in the fall as well for football and then into basketball also. So huge thank you if you have already subscribed. And of course, if you haven't, please do it. And also feel free to drop a comment, share your thoughts, like the show, comment, and also leave us 5-star rating and review on our audio platforms. That helps us a lot as well. And if you do that, we will mention it on the show as well. So we had a great comment that we talked about on one of our previous shows also. So, plenty of reasons to stay in contact with us, reach out to us, interact with the show. We love it when you do. We love hearing from everybody and really appreciate it if you are doing so. As I said, today we're going to be talking about some football. Before we do get into it fully, I just wanted to mention that we are going to be talking a little bit more about the basketball transfer portal later on in the week, as there's some additional news potentially floating out around there about an individual that Kansas may be honing in on. If you missed any of our previous shows talking about the players that Kansas already has committed in Melvin Council, Trey White, Jaden Dawson, you can be sure to go back and check those out if you missed them. And certainly stay tuned and also keep your notification settings on for when we do talk more Kansas basketball. But today we're going to be talking Kansas football. We are continuing our position breakdowns. Kevin, we are on to the defensive ends.
Yes, we are.
This is a position group that, again, is actually in the news at the moment, as it was reported earlier on Monday evening that Bai Jobe, the defensive end for Kansas, would be entering the transfer portal. So that takes away a little bit of the depth of this group, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more. Bai Jobe played in 7 games for Kansas last season after transferring in last spring from Michigan State. He was a former top 100 recruit out of Oklahoma. And did he start his career at Oklahoma? Am I making that up, or is he just
Michigan State?
Michigan State. He's from Oklahoma, though. I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Want to make sure I got that right. Started his career at Michigan State. Came to Kansas last year. Did end up playing in some games. I think recorded 9 tackles for the season. So minimal effect, but a guy that certainly had a lot of high upside and somebody that we were hoping would be able to make an impact heading into 2025. What was your reaction to him entering the transfer portal, and where do you think that leaves this position group as we kind of continue that conversation as well?
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look at the production stuff. I think people are going to say, "Oh, it's not a big loss." But I'll be honest with you, Nick. Thinking back on our show when DJ Warner left, I think one of the things I said was, "Well, thank goodness Bai Jobe is still here." Because you had another talented defensive end sort of in that same class, because Bai Jobe did redshirt his first year. DJ Warner didn't. They were in that same group. And with Bai Jobe kind of trending up at the end of last year, the most games that he played all season long was in the finale against Baylor. And so he was a guy that was trending in the right direction. So with DJ Warner leaving, you could say, okay, well, maybe Bai Jobe had even passed him up. Certainly he was going to be hard competition for DJ Warner to get through to play more. Well, now Bai Jobe isn't there. And it's kind of funny because it's been almost like a little game of jump rope a little bit, in that one of the guys that we heard the most about this spring, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, is Dak Brinkley. And so you have another young defensive end who came in that same class with DJ Warner, another highly ranked guy, is a guy that really had a nice spring. I'm not saying that's the reason Bai Jobe left. I think that if Kansas were to play a game, next week or whatever, Bai Jobe very well may have been on the 2 deep with Dak Brinkley. But I do think that it was a situation where he probably faced an uphill battle to start with the guys that Kansas had, and so decided to go ahead and enter the portal. And you would expect at this point, I think, Nick, and we'll talk more specifically about this, but you would expect Kansas to probably go ahead and replace that scholarship in the transfer portal.
Yeah, the spring window for football is open until, I believe, the end of next week or around that time. So you may see more players enter the transfer portal. Kansas has had some various walk-ons entering the portal over the course of the past couple of days. And again, this is kind of coinciding with the whole process of trying to cut down the roster limits a little bit. So there's a little bit of that involved. But Bai Jobe is, I think, probably the first player from Kansas to depart the program that potentially would have been on the 2 deep and would have been a guy that could have been a rotational player and seen the field a decent amount for Kansas. So that's why he's sort of been highlighted as the first guy to depart the program in that capacity. And as you said, I think even prior to Bai Jobe entering the transfer portal, this was a position that Kansas was probably looking to maybe add an additional depth piece already as it was. And now with Bai Jobe entering the portal, certainly now this is a position that probably Kansas wants to focus on a little bit more. They've already been after a couple of players, actually. Our good friend of the show, Michael Swain over 24/7 Sports, has done a little bit of reporting on that. If you're curious, be sure to check out some of the work that he's done on reporting on some of that. He does a great job. So this is a position group that Kansas already, I think, was interested in adding another player. Now, certainly that's probably just been accelerated by Jobe entering the portal. But like you said, Bai Jobe was certainly probably not going to be a starter and maybe even a fringe 2 deep guy when you consider some of the talent that Kansas has at this position. I think the headline of this position, Kevin, without a doubt, is Dean Miller.
Yeah.
Coming back after an All Big 12 second team season in 2024, coming back for his senior season, a guy that's had such an interesting story. We've talked about him on the show, and if you haven't really followed it that closely, he's a player that really struggled to maintain a big weight. He's a very big frame, very large frame wise, but struggled to really maintain being that size that you want at the defensive end position. Basically spent all of last offseason specifically working on that, comes in and ends up starting for Kansas and gets an All Big 12 nod. And the expectation, I think, for him this season are to take another step forward as that sort of really outside speed rush guy that can really make or break a play. It's third and long, and you need to get to the quarterback. Dean Miller's the guy you're going to be looking at.
Yeah, how quickly did that ascent happen? And it's funny because it was a really long journey for him, to your point. And I remember interviewing him last fall during camp, and he was really excited about the prospect of getting on the field, basically. And for the first time, he was a guy that coming out of high school went the junior college route because he wasn't really recruited. I asked him why. He was like, well, I was 180, 185 pounds. And he talked about it. He's 6'5", and he's got long arms and everything. So he looked like a wide receiver, but he was a defensive end prospect. And when he came into Kansas, he wasn't, that much bigger and really struggled to put on it and maintain weight. He was a guy that we obviously had the conversation with Katie O'Connor earlier this spring. And Katie talked about he loses a lot of weight through sweating, through, his work. And so he is somebody that pretty much has to always be eating when he's not playing football or working out. And to do that. And you saw the gains. And remember when he made his first sack, I mean, he jumped up. It was like the greatest moment in the history of mankind. Like he was so excited about it. And I think it says a lot for his development that people were talking at the end of the year. They're like, well, I wish Dean was maybe a little bit more consistent with his pressure rate. And it's like, this guy wasn't even going to see the field, that long ago. And I think that's the next step that he can take is we've seen the flashes, right? You've seen the tremendous quickness and athleticism he has. He's maintaining that weight now. And to your point, he is sort of the no doubt guy in that defensive line group. And so you look at him now, a year after being a second team All Big 12 guy in his first year as a starter, you do wonder just how high he can go at this point.
And on the other side, Kansas is probably going to be relying on a new face.
Yep.
In transfer Justice Finkley from Texas. He comes over to more than likely become that starter at that strong side position. By the way, we're going to hear from both Dean Miller and Justice Finkley later on in the show. I had a chance to catch up with them earlier in spring, so stay tuned for that as well. But Justice Finkley is an interesting guy in that he's probably going to be the player you look to as sort of that Jamie Robinson type, as sort of that Sam Burt type, as sort of that just sort of stalwart, strong side defensive end type player that you want to anchor one side of your D line. And he's a new face that I think Kansas is going to lean on pretty heavily this year, probably.
Two very different body types, right? Just distinctly not nearly as tall and long, looks a little bit more like a fire hydrant. But to your point, when you're setting the edge in the run game on that strong side, he's going to do that really well. This is a guy, Nick, that was in the rotation at Texas. And you look at the defensive ends that Texas had, Colin Simmons was, one of the best freshmen in the country. You look at some of the other guys they had there too. He was playing at Texas and came here to get more of an opportunity, really, seems excited about what they have. But Nick, a guy that in addition to what he's done on the field, I think the coaches have really singled him out in interview after interview after interview as one of the biggest leaders, not just on the defense, but arguably on the team as a whole. And so when you look at what you want to get out of the transfer portal, you'd love to get a first-team All-America guy out of the transfer portal. But barring that, if you're trying to get somebody on a defense that's replacing a lot of guys and getting somebody who comes from a school with a culture that Texas has had under Steve Sarkisian, that sort of fits in, that knows what it takes to win, that has that leadership and has enough on the field to sort of emerge as a starting guy opposite Dean Miller. I think I don't want to say he's exceeded expectations because, I think they wanted this from him, but I do think that he's definitely met expectations at this point.
Yeah, I mean, think about what Kansas has had at the defensive end position over the last 2, 3, 4 years. They've always had sort of that one guy you could look to as the leader of the room. And I think Justice Finkley, as you outlined, sort of stepped into that, or is in the process of stepping into that, I guess I should say, over the course of spring and into the offseason and hopefully into the fall as well. So, yeah, I think that could end up being one of the bigger additions to this team via the transfer portal that maybe won't get talked about as much. I think you look at the linebackers, you look at the receivers, like there are much flashier names that Kansas got out of the transfer portal that may make an impact over the course of the season. But Finkley, I think, is one to keep an eye on. So those are probably your two guys you expect to be your starters when Kansas walks out in week 0, I would think at this point. But obviously this is a position group that, similarly to when we talk about defensive tackles, they want to rotate. They want to have depth. And this is where it kind of circles back to the Bai Jobe discussion, where he was probably going to be in this conversation of sort of this next tier of guys. You think about Dak Brinkley, who you mentioned as a player that I'm certainly excited to see on the field as well.
Two Heisman trophies in my NCAA football dynasty. So college football 25. So no, it's Dak Brinkley was a really highly recruited guy. Was somebody that collected all kinds of offers. Texas offered him, I think, as like a sophomore in high school. He didn't continue to grow. And so I think that was when you kind of saw maybe I don't want to say the Texas is back away necessarily, but maybe the attention levels shifted in some other directions. But this was always a guy who was a national type recruit at one point. You see him out on the field, and he certainly looks like, when people say that's what they look like, Dak Brinkley is what they look like. He's what you want a young defensive end to look like. And had a very good spring, got rave reviews kind of from all kinds of people of, hey, Dak Brinkley is a guy that's really shown up well this spring. And so he's in that group. I know a few other names in there. You're hoping Dylan Brooks continues to recover from the injury that he had a year ago. He's full go, like he's out there for everything. But as you know, like it's a confidence thing too. Like, hey, am I going to be able to do everything that I once did the way that I did it? You're worried about getting hurt. I would not be surprised if Dylan Brooks looked significantly better in the fall after the spring, after conditioning and everything than he does right now. Adrian Hawley, a guy that got a lot of kudos through the spring. Katie O'Connor said he put on like 20 pounds or so for the moment that he arrived here. Another guy that's what they look like. And so I don't think you want Adrian Hawley necessarily to be in that group. You'd like to redshirt him. You'd like to redshirt Garrett Martin, who's going to arrive in the summer from that same recruiting class. Caleb Redd is another young guy that you're continuing to develop, but is another good-looking guy that flashed in the spring. And so if you can add one or two more guys to that group, especially somebody who can maybe plug right into that rotation and compete with some guys, I think that this could be a pretty good group, especially we've talked about the defensive tackles in a previous episode. Defensive tackles they're going to force quarterbacks or not allow them to step up in the pocket. And so it's going to be a question of, can Dean Miller, can Justice Finkley, can Dak Brinkley, can whoever bend that edge and get to the quarterback with the pass rush? Because if you can do that, Nick, that lack of experience on the back end looks a little bit different when they aren't having to cover guys for 6 seconds.
Yeah, the theme, I think, of that second group that you outlined with some of the names you listed is the potential is certainly there. It's just a matter of, can they tap into it, right? Dylan Brooks is another great example, a transfer from Auburn, another guy who was a highly rated prospect, dealt with a serious injury, obviously, so we would love to see him get back on the field and hopefully show what he can do. But yeah, I think that second group, Dak Brinkley didn't redshirted last year. Deshaun Warner kind of stole the headlines, I think, but Dak Brinkley was right there. I mean, he was rated almost as highly as Deshaun Warner was out of that recruiting class. And so that kind of loops into the conversation of, I think when you look at that second group of guys, there's the high end, the ceiling is really there. It's just a matter of, can a couple of those guys start to reach that, start to tap into that this season, which, that's a double-edged sword, right? I think that means that if there's some struggles there, if there's some growing pains, maybe from like a guy like a Dak Brinkley, that could become an area of weakness. So I think that kind of ties into the discussion around the transfer portal in the spring, where yes, KU would absolutely love to add in probably a player with a little bit of experience who can plug and play and just provide a little bit more extra experience and depth at that position, because I feel pretty good about Dean Miller, feel pretty good about Justice Finkley, feel pretty good about, the ceiling of some of those young guys, but you'd love to have somebody in there that can maybe stabilize a little bit on the second half of the two deep and say, hey, here's a player that has a little bit more experience that we know is going to be reliable when maybe there's some games where it could be up and down for some of those other young guys after the top two. So
yeah, Dylan Woodkey, right? Like Dylan Woodkey being a really valuable piece last year, even as a guy that wasn't going to be one of your starters, wasn't going to be a star, but he was a guy that was in there on a lot of really important downs and was a guy that, had a chance to make an impact. And so, yeah, if you can find somebody like that, I think that you feel a little bit better about this group as a whole, because then if you have Dak Brinkley or somebody like that beat out that sort of guy too, you feel a lot better about the young guy playing too.
Yeah,
absolutely. He's not out there because he has to be. He's out there because he's good enough.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And I think you touched on it. The defensive tackles being as good as they are should hopefully help these guys a little bit and maybe not put so much pressure on them to produce right away or to be really high impact right away. So that's another, I guess, positive. I think if you look at it from that perspective also on the D-line. So enough talking from us. Let's get a chance to hear from some of these guys. Taiwo Onatolu is the defensive ends coach and special teams coordinator. Had a chance to hear from him earlier this spring. We've also got interviews with Dak Brinkley, as well as Dean Miller and Justice Finkley, who had a lot of interesting things to say as well. That's all coming up as well. But that, of course, gives us an opportunity right now to tell you about Home Field Apparel. We teased a little bit last week, Kevin, that the Diamond Classics drop. And sure enough, Kansas was involved. So Kansas baseball had a heck of a weekend, if you missed it, against Kansas State. They beat them on Friday. Then they sweep them in the doubleheader. They take 3 from the Wildcats. So K-State, you don't own jack. I can tell you that. But I can also tell you that Kansas has fantastic baseball apparel over at homefieldapparel.com. You can get, it's like a baseball shirt, pullover type thing. They've also got the first ever KU hat as well that you can find over at homefieldapparel.com. So absolutely go check out those Diamond Classics, including Kansas. You can also find 140 other schools as well, 20 of the schools in the Diamond Classics. And of course, if you haven't shopped there before, be sure to use the promo code PAYHEAT24, 15% off of your first order at homefieldapparel.com. We would certainly appreciate it. You save money. It's a win-win for everybody involved. So be sure to shop over there. And be sure to keep an eye on KU baseball. We're going to be probably talking some more KU baseball over the remainder of the spring because the Jayhawks are cooking. And they are in position to make the NCAA tournament for the first time in over 10 years. So very exciting stuff there as well. But again, with Home Field Apparel, use that promo code PAYHEAT24, 15% off of your first order. And more KU football talk is coming up next.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Are you ready to win some real cash during the basketball playoffs? Well, check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 posterizes the competition. And yeah, that includes prize picks. Hit all your picks and score higher minimum payouts on Pick 6, plus even more cash if you outscore the competition. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. New players get 50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to play $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Pay Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you have not already, please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. We have surpassed 800 subscribers, so thank you so much if you already have subscribed. And if you haven't, please do so. It takes one click, super easy. So please go ahead and do that so you can stay tuned in for all of our KU coverage. We are going to be talking more KU basketball transfer portal later on in the week. But right now, let's resume our KU football talk as we continue through this conversation with the defensive ends, the group that we're breaking down. And we'll let the coaches do the talking here. As Taiwo Onatolu, the defensive ends coach and special teams coordinator, had a chance to speak with the media earlier in the spring. I will caveat this a little bit. You'll hear as part of our clip here with Taiwo Onatolu some questions about the special teams to him. He is, of course, the special teams coordinator, so there were some questions about kick return, kickoff, punting, that type of stuff. So we'll probably dive a little bit deeper into that in a later episode with special teams because it is something to discuss. I mean, KU's got a brand new kicker and a brand new punter. So
probably a return man too.
Yes. More than likely new returners as well. And Onatolu hit on that a little bit as well, but also talking defensive end. So here's everything that Taiwo Onatolu had to say earlier in the spring.
What's it been like having such a new group of specialists this year, and what do they bring to the table?
Yeah, it's been the first time in a while, but it's fun getting to know new guys in a short amount of time, and those guys have both been pretty awesome. Finn, our punter, he's done a good job. He's an experienced guy, and nothing seems to fluster him. He's got a good personality, And then same thing with Leif, very confident kid. He's been doing an excellent job. So we've got good, even when you bring in new people, you don't know kind of what you're going to get until you get them on campus. But once they've been here, they've kind of been through it, and they're very mature guys. So they bring some maturity to the group for sure.
How'd you identify them? Just as you
were just through connections, reaching out, talking to, kicking coaches we know, and then Coach Dwayne, one of our special teams analysts, he coached Leif back at ECU, so that was the connection there. And once I think he transferred to South Alabama, and once he got in the portal, then we obviously started recruiting him from there.
Dean was a guy that headed into last year, hadn't really broken through, and then had the season that he did. What's his growth look like over the last, say, year or so from where he was last spring to where he is now?
He just, even when he came in, he always had the skill set and ability, and then he had a heck of a spring last spring, so we knew he was going to do something really, really good in the fall, and he had a great season there. And he's done a complete 180, right? He kind of made a decision on his own, and then he said, I'm going to get after this. He put on the weight, and that was the biggest thing holding him back. And then he matured a lot, and sometimes when your time comes, it comes, and he was really patient with it, but he works his butt off, and we're excited to see where he'll take things next.
Justice Finkley, a guy that has a lot of experience at a previous stop, also a guy that had a lot of leadership experience at Texas. How has he kind of fit in there so far?
You would think Justice has been here for 4 seasons. Really mature guy, strong leader, comes in the room, and he leads by mostly example. The way he comes in and how early he comes in and how much extra work he's doing. You see some of the young guys and even some of the new guys, they're generating towards that, and then he backs it up in practice every day. So he plays hard, he plays with a motor, and guys feed off it, and they respect that about him.
Guys who have been playing on the strong side who previously played on the weak side, like Bai, for instance, what's the adaptation been like there?
We always say you have to be versatile, right? We name certain positions, certain things, but we're going to play the best 2 guys or best 4 guys or best 5 guys eventually. So although you're starting in one position, we try to mix guys around a little bit throughout spring ball to make sure they know both positions, because we're going to play the best guys, because that's what you do to help the team. You got to put the best 2 out there, even if they're supposedly the same position.
On Finkley's side, who else is working that side with him?
Dak's worked there. Bai's worked there a little bit, but he'll work more into the field. But mainly Dak, and then Dylan Brooks has worked there too as well, as he's coming off of injury too. So those 3 guys have been doing a great job. And then we've got a true freshman, Adrian Holly. Some of the bigger guys are playing that position. So those 4 have rotated throughout spring ball, with Justice and Dak getting the majority of those reps. But Dylan Brooks is getting reps there as well.
Katie O'Connor said that Adrian's put on about 20 pounds since he's hit campus. Did he come in with like the right habits and everything?
Yeah, Adrian, I don't know if it was 20, but he's put on really good weight. I mean, he's a true freshman, and we say this, he should be going to prom right now, and he's getting all these early enrollee, and I think he's ranging anywhere from 242 to 244 as a true freshman. So he's going to be a big kid. He came in with a big frame, naturally, so he's got a lot of good DNA in that regard, but he's been working really hard in the weight room, and Coach Sleeve and those guys have been doing a great job with him.
What does the next step look like for Dean after what he accomplished last year?
Yeah, so I just tell him, don't ever get complacent, right? Dean's a guy that when he heard he got second team all conference, he kind of just nodded his head. He kind of was disappointed. He wants to be a first team all conference kind of guy. He wants to be an All-American, and he keeps trying to find new ways to improve his game. So now that that last year was his first year playing, and he had a pretty good successful season, he knows if he can take that other step, he can really be a great player in this conference for us.
Who are some of the guys in the return game back there working?
Sure, at kick return, Emmanuel Henderson, he's doing an excellent job back there. Camp Pickett, Tate Nagy. There's a lot of guys. We're kind of, spring ball is when we throw a bunch of guys back there, and then we go back, we watch the tape and see who's comfortable. We start to just to see what they can get off a game-like simulation. At punt return, Nagy's been doing a great job. Keaton's been doing a great job. A lot of guys. So we're still trying to figure that out there, but it'll be some new faces back there for sure.
when it comes to the return game, what traits are you looking for specifically from those guys? What are you looking for from them to be successful?
Starting with punt return is one of the hardest things to do. So you got to find a guy that's comfortable and not afraid, to catch in traffic and things like that. So that's always the most difficult one. That's kind of a natural thing. So you want a guy in punt return that can make a guy miss right away, because typically there's a guy unblocked in your face. That's the first thing. Obviously, you want a guy that can change direction, but catching it and fielding it's the most important thing. Kick return, you want a guy that's can get vertical and break arm tackles, right? Because he's going to be in a little bit of traffic, so he's going to have to do a good job reading blocks. So guys that are physical, and at the kick return game, a guy that can get north and south and is really a physical runner.
Taiwo, you've thrown out a bunch of names at the end just here. What's the competition? Are these guys pushing each other?
Oh yeah, it's with bringing Justice in and the way Dean practices, and Justice kind of adds on to that. So those guys really. They play hard and they practice hard. So the younger guys behind them and some of the guys that are veterans, they had to they're stepping their game up too. So the competition's great, and that's when we're having discussions daily on who fits where. We haven't even talked about starting and things like that. We just talk about, hey, we've got some guys that can play, and we got to do a great job of getting these guys reps and throughout the summer so they can keep building on that and get to the season.
Caleb Red added another young guy to your room. What have you seen from him?
So he's been playing more to the field, and I was recruiting him pretty hard out of high school. We were actually, and he's got speed. He's got a lot of natural pass rush ability, and he's still a young guy. He's got multiple years to play, and he's a guy that's always wanting to come in and meet. So I'm excited about him. And as coaches, you're not patient enough. When you see something you like in a guy, you get excited and you push, but we just got to have some patience and keep working with him, because a couple guys have only been here for a couple months, 3 months, you know what I mean? So those guys are still working and attacking it.
With all those new faces, regardless of position, receiver, linebacker, DA, whatever it is,
Sure.
At what point in the recruitment of bringing these guys in does the special teams conversation happen? I mean, do you obviously needed to rebuild your wide receiver room a little bit, but do you talk about special teams with those guys while that's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring in guys, and sometimes guys have multiple years, sometimes guys have 1 year, and we always talk about you need guys that have versatility. You can't be a one-trick pony. If you're a receiver and you're really fast, like a thing about Emmanuel that was really impressive is we watch all their special team stuff too. So Alabama, he was running down on kickoff, he was doing kick return, he was a gunner on punt. That was part of the intriguing thing. Like, he can dominate the game. He may not get a reception in the game, but he can dominate the game in a lot of other ways. So guys like, and Cam Pickett was a returner, and those are all things we need. You don't know how these rosters are going to go, if they're shrinking rosters and things like that. So you need guys that can do more than one thing. So it's a big part of the recruiting process.
Is there sort of you feel it when they're into it? Like, you can tell when a guy doesn't want to play special teams.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you're recruiting him, it's best foot forward from both sides. Do you feel like, oh, he's in? He'll do it.
Yeah, at Coach Owe, no one comes to college to play the L5 on kickoff or something like that. But when you throw something, I always, especially if it's an offensive guy and you see they played a little special teams, and I'll throw something out at them during the recruiting process, and kind of by their response, their excitement and how they respond, if that they're really interested in it. And those guys have been, and DJ Graham, he's been doing there's a bunch of guys that we like that have been doing an excellent job. So that only helps the entire team, obviously.
With Dylan, what's his journey been like back from the injury? It'd be really easy to get down on yourself when you're out for that long. And where's he at health-wise?
Yeah, Dylan, we were slow with him initially throughout spring ball. Now we ramped it up the last couple of weeks with him. He's in a good spot. He's ready to go. He's been cleared, so he's been getting after it. And it's a mental and physical battle when you have an injury like that. And he's a kid that's been working his butt off just when he rehabbed to get to where he is now. So we're excited to get him back to where he was, and he's chipping away at that for sure.
Apparently, Finn kicked with both feet last season. Have you ever had something like that before? And what do you think?
He would be the first, right, that I've had. That'll be interesting. Yeah, so I think he did it in the game last year, but we'll see how that goes this year. I don't think he did it a whole lot. So but it is still it's a good skill set to have for sure.
That was Kansas defensive ends coach and special teams coordinator Taiwo Onatolu speaking with the media earlier in the spring about the defensive ends, as we've talked about earlier in the show, and about a little bit about special teams as well, which we'll get into later on also. We'll continue this with some player interviews. We had a chance to hear from a couple of the players, including several of the guys that we outlined earlier in the show, Dak Brinkley, along with Dean Miller and Justice Finkley. We will get to those coming up on the other side.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer alongside Kevin Flaherty. Before we get to the player interviews, Kevin, one thing I did want to mention is NFL Draft is coming up this weekend. And if you haven't, you should absolutely be subscribed to the main KCSN channel. They're going to have tons of draft coverage. Obviously, for Kansas, they have multiple players that could be potentially drafted, including one to the Chiefs, I think, possibly. Devin Neal is one to keep an eye on, as the Chiefs may be looking for a running back in those mid-rounds. So if you haven't already and you're curious about maybe some of their thoughts and you're curious about analysis for some of those KU players that may get drafted on day 2 or day 3, absolutely check out our main KCSN channel. They're going to have wall-to-wall draft coverage all weekend long. So be sure to check that out as well. Let's get a chance to hear from some of the players here, talking about the defensive ends. First up is a guy that we talked about earlier in the show, Justice Finkley, is somebody that seemingly is stepping into a little bit of that more leadership role as one of the newer players on the team. He spent some time talking about that and plenty more. Here's what Justice Finkley, transfer from Texas, had to say.
What was it about Kansas that made it an appealing choice for you?
Well, really the scheme, it being able to translate, we do a couple more things than Texas did. Coming from Texas, it was kind of like a perfect fit. It translated very well to Texas and Kansas. So,
Justice, what have you seen overall from the defensive line through spring football?
Physicality, dominance, and, our D-line has to, with our defense, the way DK runs defense, the D-line is the head of the snake. So us being physical and dominating up top is a non-negotiable. So I've just seen that all spring, and I think we're pretty on par for what we need to do in the fall.
Why do you think that you needed to explore something else other than Texas?
I think I needed to look for a better opportunity, a better fit, and Kansas just was the place for that, ultimately.
How much of a role did it play, I guess, that there would be an opportunity to compete for a lot of early playing time right away here, too?
Well, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, just the opportunity available here with all the strong side defensive ends who graduated last year. How much of a role did that play in your decision to come here?
It didn't play much of a role because I trusted too much in my ability to just come in and, do what I need to do. And that's also what my coach said, just, do what you need to do what you've been putting on film at Texas, and it will all translate well. And I feel like it's shown pretty much on the field.
What do you think of Coach McDonald's coaching style?
I love it. He's the tenacity, the way he coaches his players, that type of coaching comes from love. A lot of people can take that coaching as tough love, but, he wants to see you get better. He wants to, have the right technique, have the right alignment, have the right assignment. And so when he gets on you, it's really coming from a place of love. And that's the type of coaching that I want, that I desire.
Did you have any familiarity with any of the guys on the Kansas team or coaching staff before coming here?
I knew Kobe Bryant, mainly because we're both from Alabama. We had been talking here and there while I was at Texas as well, but that's about it.
At Texas, what was your thoughts of the Kansas program?
Kansas program, well, I know when I had committed and right before, 3 years ago, that's when the big game was in DKR. Jared Casey in the end zone, kind of had to live with that. But Kansas has always been a tough physical team. Whenever we played them, whether we went there or we came to DKR.
So strong side where you feel comfortable, or are you working anywhere else?
Well, I'll be trying to work in rush just so I can be more of a Swiss Army knife and be versatile. If I can play, I'll do anything. For as long as it helps the team win, I'll play a 3-tech, 2-eye, 9, 5. I'll play on the other side and get in the coverage at field. As long as I'm helping the team win, it could be that Swiss, that versatility factor. I have no problem playing wherever.
Was it like playing opposite Dean?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
What's that like?
It's been good. We both have, 2 force factors on the edge, and the more we can correlate, kind of sync up and be synonymous with each other, I think you're going to see a lot of things, a lot of sacks, a lot of TFLs in the future.
What are you doing personally, kind of outside of football hours, to kind of take your game to the next level?
Well, sometimes I'll get some of the guys together at my house and we'll do a lot of film watching just because I have a big projector screen at home. And off the field, we'll do a lot of film with our assistant coach, Coach Deneen. And as well as, I bring my pads up here before we get ready to go outside so I could be the first one out there. And, we're working for about 20 to 25 minutes on pass rush stuff. I try to bring guys along with me. And then most days afterwards, we're always getting some work in. So you have no choice but to get 1 or 2% better, even if you had a bad day.
Is that watching film kind of at your place? Is that sort of like a team bonding thing to you? And what other team bonding things do you do to kind of build that chemistry coming to a new place?
Well, a lot of the food places I haven't tried out here, and I've been desperately looking for some good barbecue to compare it to Texas. So we're actually thinking about going to Q39 this weekend to go check that. I've heard that's the spot. But fellowshipping with the guys, building that bond with my DNs, raising that level to where everybody who's working at the same level, giving the same effort, giving the same attention to detail and everything, that's nothing short of what I want for the room.
We just heard from Coach a few minutes ago about you stepping into more of a leadership role since you've got here. I guess, did you expect to do that, and how's that played out for you?
It's definitely something I've always been interested in, and kind of been something a little fecal with at Texas, because I've always been like a leader by example, always afraid to use voice. And now that I'm kind of experiencing, I knew when I first got here I had to put actions to words, show what I could do first, and kind of step into that leadership role before I could actually start using my voice. And so far it's going great. I think some of the guys are starting to pick up and listen to me, and listen whenever I correct them on some type of technique, or whenever they ask questions, they always come and ask me questions.
That was Justice Finkley, transfer from Texas, speaking on his leadership, coming to Kansas, and more. So really excited about Justice Finkley. I think he's, again, going to be a player that you'll want to familiarize yourself with, and somebody that maybe won't always fill up the stat sheet, but I think is going to have an impact for this team nonetheless on the defensive side of the ball. A guy that you hope fills up the stat sheet by racking up sacks this season is Dean Miller. You had a chance to hear everything that he had to say, including, Kevin, how many calories he consumes per day to maintain that weight that we talked about earlier on the show. So if you're hungry, you may want to listen a little bit more closely to what Dean Miller has to deal with in terms of his calorie intake. Here's everything he had to say when speaking with the media earlier in the spring.
What's the spring like been for you so far?
Sure, yeah, the spring it's been real productive. It's been good seeing new faces. I think it's been good working with him and just getting comfortable in the system with DK.
Yeah, what have your impressions been of him early on?
Man, really, lately especially, I've really been impressed by his football IQ. I watched film with him a lot, and really just trying to break down plays and analyze the offense so we could get a jump on them. It's been, it's been real good.
Coach O said a minute ago, when you heard you were second team All Big 12, you just kind of accepted and moved on and thought maybe you should strive for even better than that.
Right.
What goes into continued improvement for you going forward?
Sure. Honestly, it just comes down to perfecting my craft and, trying to just fix the little details of my game, whether it be first step off the ball or reading the offense, just getting keyed in so I could just elevate and step up my game to the next level.
Last year, so much was made about you stepping up your game physically, right? Adding that weight, staying at that. How did you maybe see that unfold over the course of the season, some of the work that you put in, that you talked about last year, and how have you been continuing that this year?
Definitely, yeah. Obviously last year it took some big steps in the weight department, and really just trying to stack on top of it and add to it this year. I've been working with Katie real closely, tracking some of my calories and my meals throughout the day, just making sure I'm meeting my nutritional goals so that I could just keep progressing and getting my body right for season.
How many calories are you eating per day, and protein, etc.?
Sure. There's definitely a range, but just to give you a recent one, when I was sending all my meals to Katie, it tracked up just to under 9,000 calories. So obviously some of that, you got to get some shakes in. It'd be damn near impossible to get that many calories in with just solid food, but really, especially when you're in something like spring ball and I'm just burning so many calories, shedding so much sweat, it's just, you got to rehydrate and you got to pound food all day. Yeah.
I guess, how much easier is it, if at all, having already gone through this once, like you had one successful offseason of doing this, compared to now?
Sure. Obviously it takes some getting used to and adjusting to. That was a big thing. My first 2 years here, it was hard for me to continue on down the path of gaining weight and holding it. So really just knowing how to be consistent with it has been a huge thing for me this season.
Coach earlier talked about Justice Finkley stepping into more of a leadership role since he's got here.
Right.
How have you seen that, and do you view yourself as a leader as well in this group also?
Oh, most definitely. I'm always out there trying to lead my guys, and not just the people in my room, but the people around me, whether it be defense or even if we're in the weight room, offensive guys, just trying to help everyone around me. But as for Justice, yeah, definitely. He's a real vocal guy, and his presence is felt, and I think he'll be a big factor for us this year.
What's it like playing opposite him on the field with your guys' two kind of styles?
Yeah, no, honestly, I'm excited. We kind of got that speed-power combo, and I feel like we're going to be problems for offense this year, no doubt.
You talked about gaining weight. Do you have a favorite cheat meal that you're a big fan of?
Favorite cheat meal? I mean, honestly, I just eat whatever I want. Like, for me, there's really no limitations, restrictions, anything like that. If there's something in my mind that I want to eat, I'm going to go get it. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, heck yeah.
What's the number one way you've improved this spring?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think trying to step into that leadership position. Last year I came and I was kind of a new face on that defense, just trying to find my way. And this year I'm one of the only vets who returned from last season on that defense. So really just trying to assert myself for my defense and for the whole team in general.
That was Dean Miller speaking with the media earlier in the spring. And yeah, I mean, listen, when you hear that a guy has to eat over 9,000 calories a day, that puts things in perspective a little bit. When you hear about some of what he deals with in terms of eating, and I mean, that is just an ungodly amount of calories, by the way. So shout out to Dean Miller for putting in the work to try to maintain it that way to make an impact for Kansas. Last but not least, a rising freshman, redshirt freshman now, Dak Brinkley, had a chance to hear everything that he had to say about his progression at Kansas and what he hopes for this upcoming season as well. Here's what Dak Brinkley had to say when speaking with the media earlier in the spring.
How have you kind of taken that jump kind of personally in terms of your diet or any kind of workouts that you're doing?
I would say my diet, I'm making sure that I eat 4 meals a day. And like I just said, I've been in the film room a lot this past spring or this spring right now. And, just working with Coach Deneen and working with Coach O, those guys have helped me a lot. Helped me elevate my game so much. I really appreciate those guys.
Coach O just said you're kind of playing both defensive end spots. What's it like getting to learn both?
I mean, it wasn't too rough, but once I got it down, I feel like it was pretty easy to differentiate the two positions. But I think it was it's a pretty good fit for me, and I like it a lot.
All right, so Coach Deneen, I don't know if he's told you, but he grew up here, played here. What's he told you about the program in KU?
He's told me that he got some records that are still standing, but I'm here to beat them. So that's what I tell him. Coach Deneen, he helps me out a lot. The records, that's one thing he throw in my face a lot. So I really want to beat that.
Hey, Dak, when you play both defensive end spots, what are the differences between the two?
I would say the difference between the two defensive end spots is one, I'm playing in more open space versus the other one where it's pretty much I'm already on top of the tackle or the guard. So that would be the most difference.
What are some differences you see from last year's defensive coordinator to this year, DK McDonald?
I would say that this year, Coach DK, he really wants us to leave it all out on the field. He really wants us to he just wants us to leave it all out on the field, man. He doesn't want us to go back, watch film, and be like, oh, I could have did this, I could have did that. It's all about doing the right things at the right times. And then he always tells us, if you do right with your eyes, you play right. So that's one thing he emphasizes with us and as a defensive whole is our eyes, because that's our key.
Is there anything specific you've been working on this spring that you're trying to improve in your game personally?
Honestly, this spring I would say that I've been trying to improve on the offensive play style or offensive how they set up, determining what play they can run out of different formations or whatever. So that's the biggest thing I've been working on this offseason.
Makes sense.
About your meals a day. What is the calorie goal you're trying to hit?
My weight goal, I've been trying to hit 245 plus or 245, and I've hit that. And I just want to thank Miss Katie and Miss Courtney, the nutritionist staff, just for allowing me and helping me push me to that weight goal.
How much did you get to put on to get to 245?
I'll say I put on a good amount. When I first got here, I was around like 219, 218, but now I'm like 245. So I put on a good amount of pounds.
What's that process like? I mean, is it just eat basically, or is there anything more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty much that. You gotta wake up. I gotta start off with a good breakfast, start off with a good lunch, dinner, and then throughout the day I just snack. So that just helps me keep my weight up.
What is it like working with the nutrition staff?
Man, honestly, it's very, I would say, comfortable because they know what they know what you need. They know what you need. And they know how to help you. So I would say it's very easy to work with them. And
what are some of the biggest challenges been for you from a nutritional and weight gain perspective?
I would say the biggest challenge for me is just to maintain my eating habits. Because some days I'll eat 4 meals. The next day it'll be like, man, I don't know if I can keep eating. So that's probably been my biggest challenge.
Do you have a cheat meal that you love to eat?
A cheat meal? I'll probably say my biggest cheat meal would probably be getting like a Chick-fil-A meal, just a regular Chick-fil-A. Going to Chick-fil-A, yeah.
That was Dak Brinkley speaking with the media earlier in the spring, sharing a little bit of insights into what he hopes for from himself heading into this upcoming season. And when you look at this group, Kevin, overall, I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier in the show, but this is a group that I think you feel pretty good at the top end in terms of what you hope to get from Dean Miller and Justice Finkley. You know, with Bai Jobe transferring, I think you take a knock to the depth, but also you've got some guys that have some high ceilings. But this is certainly a position group that you hope Kansas looks to add an additional player, maybe with some more experience, just to shore up the back end of that group on the depth chart and make sure that this is a position group that can excel with the extra depth. But overall, when you look at this position group, how do you feel? How do you feel about this group? You know, let's say it's 3rd and 10 in a big time game, in a 1-possession game. Can these boys get it done?
Well, and that's the big question, right? Is I think that you had some really explosive moments from this group last year, especially Dean Miller. But I think consistently Kansas felt like it wasn't able to get pressure with 4 in key situations. And so that was when you started to really see J.B. Brown used a ton as kind of the best pass rusher. You started to see Marvin Grant used as a pass rusher and kind of the different blitzes that they were able to bring. And we know that DK McDonald wants to keep things simple, right? Like that's been the hammering home point all spring is keep things simple. Nothing is simpler, Nick, than when you can get pressure with 4. If you do that, then that makes life a lot easier. And so I think with this group, you know, Dean Miller, I thought looked really good in the spring. I was impressed with what I saw from Justice Finkley. Obviously, you know, we don't get to see all of practices. We see a portion of it. Dak Brinkley looks like he's taking a step forward. But I think the biggest thing that you want to see, Nick, is there were games 2 years ago where people just couldn't block Austin Booker. And even if Jeremy Robinson wasn't the most consistent pass rusher opposite him, Kansas got more consistent pressure, I feel like, than it did with sort of it out of its base defenses. And that's going to be the thing to watch with this group. I think they're going to be pretty good against the run again. I think Dean Miller, even though he's not like a big guy, he plays with a lot of motor. He plays with a lot of effort. There were some plays going back. I rewatched every game from last season. There were some plays, Nick, where he was making tackles on running backs 10 yards downfield because he didn't quit on a play and kept going. Brinkley, I think, is going to do a nice job of setting the edge. The defensive tackles are going to be pretty good. I think they're going to be good when the other team runs the ball. The question is going to be, hey, it's 3rd and 8. You know, can you get to the quarterback without having to set extra help? And can you feel confident that your group is going to be able to do that more consistently than not. I know you asked how I feel. I feel like it's a group that is going to be pretty good against the run. Probably the question mark that I have is that consistent pass rush going to be there? I do think Kansas has some solid pass rushers at the second and third level if they want to use those guys. A guy like Bengali Kamara, I think is a good pass rusher. If you turn him loose, Joseph Sipp is a good blitzer. Trey Lathan has some impact moments as a blitzer. I think they've got some guys in the secondary that could be good blitzers. But do you blitz because it's something fun and you're trying to throw somebody off the scent, or do you blitz because you have to blitz and the other team knows that you have to blitz because you can't get pressure with 4? My concern, I guess, for this group, I'm not saying they can't do it. I just think it's not going to be something that we have an answer for probably until, if not game 1, then certainly game 2 against Missouri.
Well, and that's maybe one of the biggest outside factors that you were kind of mentioning there is Brian Borland was very conservative when it came to blitzing. He was not somebody that typically wanted to utilize the blitz very much. We don't know what DK McDonald is going to want to do. DK McDonald may have a little bit more of an aggressive mentality when it comes to that. So he may be already, game planning different things to utilize more guys getting to the quarterback. And, as you said, it may just be a situation where it may be determined by how Kansas performs to start the season, right? If they are able to get it done with 4 versus maybe they do have to sprinkle in more of that. So that adds another layer to it. Is with DK McDonald, we're just not sure how aggressive he may want to be as compared to what Brian Borland was previously at Kansas. So yeah, all in all, I think your concern is valid, and I share that concern, right? Like Dean Miller, I think is somebody that on a down in, down out basis is going to give you great effort, but is he somebody that's going to make that game defining, drive defining play that so often you need, your all conference level players to make? And that's where he wants to be. And so if he wants to be that, then we're going to have to see it from him every game this season. So he's really the guy to look out for. But then again, I think that the depth could be something to keep an eye on as well. You never want to think about injuries, but this is a position group that already I'm circling and saying, man, if you lose a guy to injury or something like that, things suddenly become a little bit more hairy, I think. So we'll see if how aggressive Kansas is in the transfer portal at this particular spot. We've talked about it, just sort of a macro level, offensive tackle, probably secondary, cornerback, and then now defensive end, I think, with Bai Jobe now becomes sort of your top 3 spots that you look at. And the problem is guess what? Everybody around the country wants a starting tackle. Everybody around the country wants a starting pass. Everyone around the country wants a reliable, experienced edge rusher type player. So this is going to be nip and tuck for Kansas on what they may try to find in the spring transfer portal. And again, that window for football stays open for about another week or so, I believe. So you'll see probably players from other schools enter. Obviously, you had the Nico Iamaleava saga that unfolded. So there's still could be more players entering the portal around the country and possibly from Kansas as well. Of course, we'll be keeping an eye on that and breaking it down if anything like that does happen. So, Kevin, you got anything else to add on our position breakdown of the defensive ends before we wrap this one up?
No, it's an interesting group and ultimately one that I'm not sure that we'll have answers until the football's kicked off. Some of these I think you feel pretty good about. We've talked about two position groups we've talked about, but haven't done our breakdowns on yet. Quarterback and running back, I think you feel pretty good about. Defensive tackles, I think you feel pretty good about. Some of these are a little more wait and see, and I think the defensive end group, particularly from a depth standpoint, is going to be wait and see. But I will say this, Nick, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we weren't worried about what Kansas had depth-wise at defensive end. We were worried about, the top 2 guys and who they were going to have on the field. And so it is certainly one of those, sort of hashtag first world problems type of deals in that, you have guys that can rush the passer. You do have some guys with some experience. The question is, how are you going to fill out that group?
Yeah. And as Kevin said, if you missed any of our previous position breakdowns, you can check those out. defensive tackles, wide receivers, tight ends, corners. As he said, we do still have a couple more to do that we'll hit over the course of the remainder of the spring. We got quarterbacks, running backs, and safeties, I think, are our last three. And then we'll talk special teams at some point. I don't want anybody to think that we're glossing over special teams, because you won't find a bigger advocate than punters or people too than me. So trust me, we're going to talk about the special teams.
When we did our game by game breakdowns heading into last season, where we looked at every game from the previous season, I swear, Nick, I heard more special teams talk from you probably than from offense or defense. It was like, and then the kicker did this, or, say you had a bad punt, or, whatever else. And so nobody sell Nick short on special teams, because he has been about that life.
Football has 3 phases, not 2, 3. And that third, I guess I'm holding up 4. Oh, yeah, there we go. 3 fingers. 3 phases, and that third phase, special teams, sometimes is the most important one. So I don't want to, gloss over those guys. We'll give them their fair share of airtime at some point in the near future. So we're also going to be talking more KU basketball transfer portal coming up later on this week. And again, we're probably going to talk a little bit of NFL draft, depending on where we see some of those KU players that are draft eligible get drafted in. So that could be something to keep an eye on as well. And again, I would check out our main KCSN channel as well. They're going to have wall-to-wall coverage of the NFL draft from Thursday night, Friday, Saturday. Every second of the draft is going to be covered by KCSN, which means that whenever those KU players do get drafted, they're going to be talking about it. So you can check out some of their analysis as well. They do fantastic work with the KCSN draft guide and covering the NFL draft. So definitely be sure to check that out if you have not already. But thanks again for checking out us as well. And if you haven't, please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, and our YouTube channel of Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. We really appreciate the support. As always, drop a comment, share your thoughts, join the conversation. And until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.